I'm excited to have Sahar back with us and Tim, her co-author, do a book review and a masterclass, art of writing and everything else that we'll cover today. Um, there are many ways to introduce this duo, but I'll let them talk about why they wrote the book and what energizes them. What I will tell you, having read the book and hosted Sahar before, is that there are loads of adventures and surprises in store for you. So let's get started. Sahar, Tim, tell us who you are and why do you do what you do?
Sure. First, thank you so much, Utkarsh, for having me back. I'm so excited and also so excited to see all of the amazing work that Network Capital has been up to. So for everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Sahar Mansoor. I'm the founder of Necessities. We're essentially a zero waste hub, a knowledge hub, a product hub for all things that are sustainable. And we seek to reimagine the way we consume everyday products in a way that should not land up in the oceans and landfills. And I'm based out of Bangalore.
Awesome. And why do you do what you do? You've told us that before, but let's take the book lens. Why do you do what you do? Why did you write this book?
Yeah, so honestly, for me, working with waste because really got me interested about understanding waste from a very ground up perspective. And that made me really introspect and make changes in my own lifestyle. And I think, knowledge is so powerful, and we wanted to make information super accessible, super fun. Zero waste can sound pretty daunting, pretty intimidating and overwhelming, and the idea to write the book was to have really practical steps that you can adopt and something that really resonates with the Indian audience. Like when I started my zero waste journey, I wish there was a book, and that's why we kind of put all of our learnings into this little book that we love, hoping to share all the lessons, mistakes, so other people don't make the same mistakes.
Awesome. And Tim, how did this partnership happen? What do you do and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, of course. So thank you for having me. I'm just for everyone out there, I'm Australian and based in Sydney at the moment. So Sahar's in Bangalore, and that's where I first met her and also worked alongside a great team she has with her social enterprise focused on reducing waste in India. And that was something that I sort of came across organically working in the sustainability space for a number of years within India, and also prior to that, Southeast Asia. My sort of passion to get into that area was all about seeing waste when I'd been in those sort of environments, either traveling or working, and seeing large amounts of waste and environmental degradation as a whole, and really wanting to address that and do something about that. Certainly taking towards a community development and social impact lens. And that was something that Sahar's team in Bangalore is really passionate about. So very happy to jump on board and create this book, which was all about really increasing the amount of engagement and awareness of environmental issues, and providing an educational tool, but really just more of a fun and interactive toolkit for people across India to be involved in, and in a way that hasn't been available before for South Asia, I should say, which is really exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, writing a book is a time-consuming, challenging, draining task. So let's discuss some of those less talked about aspects of it. Let's talk about pitching. How did you both approach the publishers? Did they approach you? Talk to us about the messy parts. We love mess.
Yeah, honestly, Utkarsh, I'm a dyslexic kid. Like growing up, I, still mix up my M and my B and like D. So this is really pretty unreal for someone with all the learning disabilities that I've grown up with. And to be honest, it sounds so amazing, like, writing a book, but the logistics, the editing process, the number of rounds of editing, the S's and the Z's, and the different house styles that different publishing houses have, those are all kind of totally underestimated how much time that all takes. So to be honest, we got really lucky, and Penguin was extremely generous, and they reached out to us almost in 2017 and said, we think there's an appetite for this book. Do you want to write this book? And I was a 2-person team at that time, and I just didn't have the time or bandwidth to do so. If I was writing the book, then there wouldn't be any enterprise, and no one would be shipping out the orders. Because I was also kind of the delivery person at the time. So we stayed in touch, And, we were having all of these amazing learnings through all of our interactions and live workshop elements. And often we thought people were asking us the same questions. And often people would ask us on World Earth Day to be, say, in Delhi, in Chennai, in Kochi, all on the same day. And we were saying, how can we kind of scale up all of this fun knowledge that we've got around sustainability? And that's kind of how the book kind of came about. And, there are guidebooks on everything, like whether it's like health and wellness, on how to meditate, on how to diet, on how to, there are just so many how-to books. But unfortunately, there aren't as many in the sustainable realm. And that's kind of the gap that publishers and ourselves were looking to solve and kind of fill. So really sweet and generous of them to wait and patient for them to wait. But then we kind of started writing in 2019 when, Tim joined. And I think that made it so much easier. I mean, if anyone really wants to write a book, highly recommend doing it with a co-author to keep yourself accountable. And it makes the journey way more fun. And palatable sometimes.
I can jump in there, I suppose, to share a little bit more of the mess that you were terming. So I've joined in 2019. Previously, I was with a couple of other businesses in India. So I was aware a little bit of the country as a whole and the working environment as well, and also the need for this kind of resource. But when I jumped on board with Sahar, we've really focused on creating a knowledge hub of information, which was something that was a passion for her team moving in. So we're talking things like creating campaigns where we're trying to move from a plastic straw to a coconut leaf straw, creating online education material as well, and then also writing this book. But then some of the challenges that we actually faced was I wasn't in the country the whole time, and this is prior to COVID hitting as well. So I had to be based out, and we were doing video conference calls and trying to articulate Sahar's first person narrative, which really is a core essence of this book, how it's interwoven within with actually recording and sort of voice record, and having that placed down on a piece of paper, then going back over again, and then having that sit in place with other tips and tricks and recipes and the evolution of the process from sort of the point at the end of 2019 to a point at the end of 2020. And for a large part of that, I was back in Australia with COVID and many more video calls and schedules that we had, where we're just sort of placing more resource and more toolkits within. So things like the Zero Waste Library to really get all of Sahar's knowledge in her mind and all of the team's knowledge as well from Bare Necessities, the business, onto pieces of paper was really sort of that layering evolution process. So a lot of fun, but quite tedious at times too.
I can imagine. Co-author like a co-founder. There's a lot that can go right. There's a lot that can go wrong. So we'll discuss that. But I want to actually dial back a little bit. So it's not so common that publishers reach out. Usually it's the other way, especially for, I don't know if you're a first-time author or not, but perhaps. Yeah. So it's not so common. So it's amazing that they reached out. There was a market opportunity. But still, you have to write a book proposal, a manuscript, all of those kinds of things. So talk to us about those parts. How did both of you divide the responsibilities?
Yeah, definitely. So honestly, we initially put in a proposal for a kids' book, and the publisher reached out to us that I'm not in the kids department. That's not what I'm interested in, so it was from the get-go. It was a bit of a process. So we took a second stab at it, where we put together kind of the idea that we had, which really does derive inspiration from our workshops. And then we kind of submitted that in, and she said, you know what, this looks great. When can you kind of submit the manuscript? So then we worked backwards, put on, timelines, and then basically visa issues. Tim had to leave India. And so we started to just spend a lot of time doing this on video call. And that meant basically carving out time on your, hectic work day and just saying, hey, I'm going to be in the upstairs table and chair, don't disturb me for X amount of hours, which is quite challenging when you're trying to run a small social enterprise in space, I think, first of all. But I think that was the easy part in retrospect. fast forward a few months and the pandemic hits and Tim is back in Australia. And of course, COVID is here, so no one can do anything. So whether then our orders that we're dispatching, dunzoing deliveries or sweet deliveries across town, paperwork still needs to happen. So you're like literally the printer, you're the delivery person, you're all of that. And then you also have to say like 8 a.m. I'm going to be at my desk because Tim is 5 hours away, 5 hours behind in Australia. And, just have to be there at your desk to kind of have that discipline and keep those timelines going. So I think that was hard. And then we kind of kept doing manuscripts and different versions. And then each version came back with so much feedback. And then editing is...
So from the publishers, the editor? Okay.
Exactly. So we had, an editor who gave us kind of big picture feedback, and then we tried to incorporate that in. And then we had a copy editor, then we had another copy editor, and then, so those are different kinds of rounds. And honestly, whenever I think a couple of times I would tell my girlfriends, I'm like, I think that's it. Turn in the last version, and then it comes back. We're doing it again.
It was perpetually optimistic. I kept going, oh no, this is like another 10 rounds. And she's like, this is done. No, another 10.
Like there were so many more rounds even after I thought we were totally done. So that was totally surprising. And then, I think finally at the end of the year, I think things got opened out a little in terms of COVID restrictions. And I went for one like Christmas party with a few of my football friends. And it was a nice loud night, but I had a 8 a.m. schedule with Tim. So just despite my situation, you have to coffee up and be there. So those are the ups and downs of all of it. I think it's been quite a ride, but definitely recommend doing it with a co-author.
Yeah. But it's, of course, time zone coordination. Sometimes you have to coordinate writing styles, many other approaches. So what were the areas of agreement and disagreement?
Tim, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I guess I think one of the good things that we did moving in was keep a very open mindset about how we were approaching it. We were developing a lot of these ideas, as Sahar mentioned, from the workshops, but it's difficult when you're trying to place someone's life and her story into a book in the way that a narrative, and how much is a good amount to be sharing about the inner workings of Sahar's mind, which I know quite intrinsically now from writing, helping write a book, but is that too much for the reader on an everyday basis who doesn't know Sahar as a friend? So, and then where do you actually have that sort of line about you share too much or not sharing enough? Because the whole book's about trying to provide transparent information to provide those solutions. But then, do we say, on Sahar's 5th birthday, this happened and this caused all of this, or does that actually relate to every single reader out there? So those kind of areas wasn't like a heated disagreement at all, but it was trying to get some perspective from ourselves, and being able to step back and reflect on that after a month or something, or taking it to an editor. It could be the publisher, or it could be just a friend or similar, or family member as well, who had a look over the manuscript. Was one of the key areas where I think we had to work on it a lot to get the right level of personal insights into it. So it's kind of, hopefully we found that right mark in terms of being able to interweave Sahar's story throughout. But I think that was probably, I think the funnest part to write together, but also the most challenging, because it is a personal story, and it's like, how do you know this is going to relate to every single reader?
I agree. Let's discuss the book structure a bit. Table of contents is not the easiest thing to prepare, and especially for something like this. How did you go about doing so?
Yeah, Tim, do you want to take that too? Because he's like a structural engineer.
Yeah, of course. So I thought it may have actually been a good place just to have a look at, because a lot of the narrative and the flow that we've actually done is moving from those intrinsic areas and the very intimate areas of your life. And so quite often opens up some of the workshops and talks about talking about the bathroom and the fact you're using a toothbrush and toothpaste every morning. So the way we actually approached it was taking that simple mindset of what do you do first thing each day and how do you expand that? So first of all, you're looking at your bathroom area, then moving on to your closet, and then into more communal setups, so your kitchen, your home, gifting or community, and then global aspects as well with both city and travel. And the reason behind that was trying to allow the readers see what the smallest solutions in those intimate areas can do exponentially, and not necessarily trying to tackle those big issues all the time. So it's really just that sort of staged approach. And that's why we really looked at it moving up from there. In terms of the inner structure of the chapter, I've mentioned a couple of times how we've interwoven Sahar's story throughout, but the reason behind doing that was really to make the activities quite impactful based on the experiences she could share, based on the mistakes that she'd made previously in certain instances, or the reasons behind why she was successful. And by that, I can fall back on something, as I mentioned, with the toothpaste or toothbrush, where going to buy a bamboo toothbrush was a great solution. Also for her, learning how to make a toothpaste was a great solution. But then we've also got other things. If you're not a reader who's going to go out and make your own toothpaste, you can go and purchase it at stores that are available in India as well. And those kind of layered approaches is sort of the way we did it, to have that ongoing layering of knowledge for the reader.
Yeah, you're really well explained.
Sorry, Utkar, sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. I was just saying, I thought that was well presented.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Tim. I think just to add on to that, really when you think about the environment, I think it's a little intimidating because you often don't know if your actions have any impact, right? And it's like you're reading all of this stuff, CO2 emissions, we have 7 to 10 years if we're optimistic, and the IPCC, all of that. And I think zero waste is just one way to visualize that your actions actually have an impact. And for me, working in the environmental sphere, I definitely had a lot of frustration. But then the idea of that my actions have a solution to play in a very, very tangible way, that's kind of what we wanted that journey to be portrayed through the book. And while I'm not trying to say that you can buy your way into sustainability. That's not what I'm saying by purchasing that bamboo toothbrush. But it's visualizing your life and how you start, and how you might start from a smaller lens, which is like the actions that your immediate actions have control over, and then you move into much larger lens about you might move from your personal care to your kitchen to your closet, but then you're looking at cities and communities and really kind of what the role of zero waste or circular economies in the larger ecosystem. And I think until we understand it for ourselves, it's so much harder for us to understand it in a more systemic approach, or in a much larger level from a city or a community or a country perspective. So that's kind of what we try and inculcate through the book as well.
Awesome. Sarah, how did you decide to name this book?
Honestly, I think it just reflects what we really truly need. And I think if the pandemic taught us one thing, it was that we need so little to be so happy. Most of us wore like 2 sets of pajamas all year. And truly, there are some of those things that are just our bare necessities. And the book is kind of a reflection on what we need to introspect on and what we really need to live a life that's sustainable, and one that hopefully doesn't take more than we need to.
What's interesting about this book is that it's also intimately connected to what you do. So you're not sort of providing examples based on, you say, secondary research. This is like living, breathing self, which I find always to be a little more impactful than other stories. But you have been running your business for some time now. Which stories made their way in, and which examples, which concepts you were not able to include them in?
Yeah, honestly, I would love to go way deeper in circular economy principles. because I think it is the future. I think we really need to restructure the way we're currently consuming, and that means kind of rebringing back that refill model. I mean, I'm sure you and I remember the soft drinks of the world. We would get back that 50 paisa when we return that glass bottle.
Yeah.
So there is this movement, and there is a wave that is coming back with the refill, reuse models, and it's kind of interesting how the EU is banning single-use plastic. You're seeing different things, and they're kind of small nano movements, and you also see amazing social enterprises and startups, whether that's Loop or Clean Label, really being part of the solution, and that's something that really excites me. So I think I would love to go deeper, examples of packaging using seaweed and mushrooms and things like that, which are really going to, I think, redefine the way we're currently packaging things in a way that will, completely decompose and go back to nature and compost. So I think those are concepts that I'd love to incorporate maybe in a second book. Who knows?
Why not?
But things that did make it to the book were, why we should gift more mindfully, and what were some of the best gifts I've received. I mean, on a more personal note, I lost my dad when I was very little, but he planted a coconut tree in our house, and it fruited, I think, 10 years after he passed. And every year we have this amazing coconut harvest, and everyone at their office, everyone kind of enjoys the coconut. So when we gift, we communicate so much of who we are through that. And can it be something that's a little bit more mindful? So I think those were kind of stories that made it in. And then I think the ones around community, we did a lot of examples of actually Mumbai, whether it's the local train or the Mumbai Dabbawalas, and how that system has existed for so long. And those are also some things that I think I really like those examples.
Awesome. Tim, Sahar, different nationalities, different backgrounds, different cultures. Did that play into the book? Like, was there a discussion around including examples, case studies from a different lens, or was that not much of an issue?
I wouldn't think it was an issue, solely for the fact that when we walked into this, we wanted to produce a book that was for India or for that South Asia as a whole, and that was, I suppose, to put it as really mundane, that's what we were contracted to do. Had we written a book that was written for Australia, then the book would not have been published. And for me, it was quite exciting because I was from the outside perspective, and I'd probably still term myself quite a novice in terms of India, having only spent a couple of years there in comparison to the whole life of Sahar and many others as well. But I think what it enabled was getting a perspective of asking questions, because I didn't know so many intricate parts of India. And because of that, I'd ask questions that might seem very, very mundane to Sahar, for example, something like, why aren't people taking the metro? We have a conversation in the book about the uptake of the Bangalore metro, because it's such a very different thing to do in terms of with socioeconomic classes and people coming on to actually ride that, and all of the community taking it together. So whether you're earning 10 rupee a day or thousands of rupee a day, you're all intermixing on the train. But for me, from an outsider, I didn't quite understand the difference in terms of why people would want to take public transport or not take public transport, and then the benefit for that from an environmental perspective to reduce air pollution in that example. I think in fact, I was asking those questions of Sahar or other colleagues at Necessities, or people I knew, friends living in India, kind of brought that outside area in, which was quite unique in it. I don't know if you'd like to add to that, Sahar, a little bit. So whether my questions or my perspective kind of led to it.
Yeah, honestly, I think Tim is being very humble. He worked at Dairy Dam before this in the composting industry, worked in the solar energy industry before. So I think he's also very curious about India, and I think deeply loves India. So it was actually really fun and interesting. I don't think there were much conflicts at all. So yeah, I think it was pretty fun. It was smooth sailing. Yeah.
That's amazing. Conflicts, I didn't really ask this for conflict, although that happens many times. Also, the national styles of working together are different, right? India is a different culture working wise, high context, low context, those kinds of things come in, and Australia is different.
Yeah,
So
of
it
course.
seems
So
like
I could
you
answer
both,
that more directly if you like.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's an ongoing struggle I've got with working with India, because I'm very, very timely. So so when I'm sticking to a meeting at 8:30 in the morning Bangalore time, and she's not there at 8:30, it's kind of that me trying to relax and go with the flow a little bit more, because it is a completely different cultural setup. A lot of my learning in that was really just being able to relax, and I think talking to colleagues and everything around, because that's not done within Australia. I was suddenly something that I've continued to learn and continue to develop over the number of years that I've been involved within Indian companies since. And one of the ways that I did that was really taking the perspective that this is a book for India. It's not a book for Australia. So we're trying to stick to an Australian standard, and you get there on time at 8:30, as opposed to a more flexible time arrangement, as Sahar likes to have a second coffee or something in the morning. Then yeah, it's
8:30, I'll be making my coffee and I'm like, oh, just a little bit more, one last cup before I go out. So I'm literally always 5 minutes late minimum, unfortunately, especially in the mornings though. It was like Saturday, Sunday that we were writing, so I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
I was actually just about to come to the writing schedule bit, but yes, you were saying you're a morning person.
I was going to say I'm a morning person, and I happen to be, for the majority of the editing process, suddenly like 5.5 hours ahead of Sahar. So I'm waiting around all day going, wait till 3 p.m. my time, and she finally gets there. So yeah.
How about the writing schedules? You both are not full-time writers, so you have to carve out time in your day to write, edit, pitch, publish, do all these kinds of things. Were there some things that worked for both of you? Because you also had to collaborate over and above just writing.
Yep.
Time management, attention management, energy management, any and all advice would be helpful to our listeners.
Yeah, honestly, I've had phases where it's easy, it's had phases where it's tough. Just because you have another whole like full-time business to run, and you have like 13 other teammates who need your time and attention and like queries and everything. But I think what really helped for Tim and I is we have this like master Excel and different tabs of people who we want to, reach out to, what we want to do, all of the goals. So I think we communicate very clearly, and we put that on paper, like on Excel, very quickly. And I think that really helps. And then setting time ahead of time, I think so. We basically, I think the whole year we've spent every weekend together. So it just kind of was just like basically marking out that time, because I know that was really hard during a work week for both of us, because Tim is working as well, all of that. So being really honest and upfront right from the get-go, and then making that time sacred. And when you say you're going to be there, just be there, and then try and be intentional with each other. And then I think, I thought the work is done once the book is out, but I definitely underestimated the amount of just kind of marketing and PR, and how much energy you need to really like map to that process is something I totally underestimated. And that you need to be organized. So that Excel is super useful. But yeah, I'm not going to say that it's free flowing all the time. I think I definitely have patches where I'm struggling with other stuff that's on my plate. So it's ups and downs, really.
Yeah, I just to add to that as well, and to your question in regards to sort of advice to other people as well. This may be me coming in from an Australian perspective, but I think Sahar and I were quite happy, and probably are quite happy, to argue with each other at times, which definitely clears the air, because if you've got it and just plateauing and trying to ignore it for a period of time, then I think that could simmer away. But we suddenly we're able to just say, hey, we're frustrated, let's just go and talk about something else for a while. And in some ways, having our own core work, so Sahar's business and the job I was doing at the time, allowed us to step away, and we could talk about something else and talk about what's going on in our life. So it's not that full-time writing area. And I think that really enables a lot more freedom, and probably limits the amount of writer's block or periods like that you might actually have, being able to actually step away. So yeah, definitely I'd say share ideas with any co-author or people around, and speak to people who aren't writing the book too, like just to freshen your own minds. Because if you're just talking, if I'm talking to Sahar as the only person all the time just about the book, then yeah, it sort of gets quite cocooned, I would imagine. Whereas actually being able to have a chat about other similar concepts or completely different could bring things into the book that we might not have realized in any extent. And sort of using Sahar's gifting ideas, for example, we were doing a Secret Santa at some point with Bare Necessities, the team. And some of those ideas came in about gifting plants, for example, when at the end of the year with a Christmas party in that instance, or it could be any other holiday period, about doing things sustainably. And those kind of ideas were just out there because we stepped away from talking about the book all the time and saying, okay, let's just go have some fun. Let's go talk to our friends. And then suddenly you've got those extra things that you can go and contribute and share with the readers as well.
Awesome. What has been the favorite feedback for both of you of any reader? What did that person say that really made your writing process and all the hours spent collaborating, writing, editing worth it?
I can start. I did this talk, I think, just a month ago, and there was this girl who was just taking copious notes about everything. And then at the end of the panel, the moderator very generously said, and there's a book if you want to check it out. And then she wrote to me, like, I think 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later, and said that she just kind of moved back to India and like deeply cares about sustainability, studied it for really long, but had no idea where to start. We also listed people and organizations, whether it's like you want to recycle your shoes or your clothes, or we've listed basically everyone who's inspired us, who we basically deeply respect and admire. And she also said that naming and mentioning all of these people and organizations like made me go to the right spot when I needed it. And that was literally exactly the reason why we wrote the book. So I was just really, really happy to hear back from her. And I was happy to hear that feedback.
Yeah. I mean, I love how actionable the book is. The examples, the references, it's a collaborative book. I don't think I want to call it a 101 because it's fairly nuanced, but it's 101 plus plus plus. So I can relate with that, the girl. And Tim, any things that jumps out at you?
Yeah, it happened on the last another podcast that I was on, and probably come up a few times as well. Just in terms of feedback, saying that it's a book that we can pick up and go back to time and time again. Could be for the activities, could be for recipes, could be for those organizations. And the reasons, just to add to what Sahar said with the organizations, the reason to add those in is based on where you are in India. You might have a need for a composting organization, but you might not have access to the one in Bangalore, but there's an organization in Kolkata or in another location, and something close to you that can help you live more sustainably. So there are reasons for people across the country to go back to read the book. And when we placed our first manuscript into Penguin in February 2020, we had feedback from a colleague of ours saying, oh, it was a great book, I'd like to read it, but it's not a book that you just go back again. Like, it's fantastic, really fascinating, but you just read all the way through and that was it. Whereas by the time we went through another 10 months or so of reconstructing the book, adding the layered on format, it's now become a book where we're getting that feedback. Whereas actually I could come back to this book and grab it again and reference it and look at a new idea and actually use it as a guide over and over again. So I think that for me is something that I'm really proud that we achieved from the feedback we've been getting.
Just to add on, I think not just illustrations as well are something I really love, and that's what my colleague Molly did. And I think that also makes it super digestible on every chapter.
Yeah, the illustrations that I highlight, and honestly, for anybody who's reading it or will read it, illustrations are not that easy to commission. So usually, I mean, I'm not sure how it was with your publisher. Usually you are responsible for the illustrations if you have some specific requirement. So you need to be tuned with Figma, this and that. So good job to Molly. I hope she enjoys, this little claim to fame here. But just like wrapping up, Sahar, Tim, any advice for first-time collaborators or first-time writers for getting your work out there? Any and all advice about, say, overcoming a lack of confidence, if any of you face that at any point in time, or the fear of a negative pushback, or anything else, just parting advice would be great.
Sure, I can start. Honestly, like, don't let any kind of societal norms or any kind of any notions that you might have, limitations that you have of yourself, like hold you back, because us humans are just insanely resilient. So we can really do anything we set our mind to do. I did grow up with learning disabilities. It was extremely hard to read. I would literally finish reading the paragraph or the essay at a test, and then the teacher would say pencils down. I wouldn't have even started, writing the second question perhaps. Because I was so slow. And, my sister would read books to me from the library to just encourage me to fall in love with books, even if that meant she was reading aloud to me. So I think, wherever you are in your journey and whatever your objective is, whether you want to run an amazing social business or you want to write a book, whatever it might be, it sounds super cliche, but honestly, just go for it. And always ask for help, and feel free to ask for help because there's plenty of people who are willing to collaborate and willing to join you on your journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tim, any last words?
Yeah, of course. I think just knowing the reason why you want to do something and having that as a core, and that kind of reason can evolve over time. But if you set out to write a book, for example, what's the reason behind you writing it? And it could be completely different for myself or yourself to another person writing it. But for us to write this book, it was really to educate and engage and provide that unique knowledge hub that wasn't actually out there for India. And say, for instance, if you're wanting to set about to actually write this, you don't know if you're actually doing it, then if you've got a reason, a core reason why you want to be doing it, and you can always fall back on that when your confidence might be a little bit down, I think that will really help pick your confidence up, along with sort of sharing those ideas and conversations with people around you as well, with a number of those other points we've sort of mentioned earlier, in terms of just having a chat with everyone around about topics that may or may not be directly involved in your project. But you'll find more and more that the external areas can also become involved in that project as well. So it's quite exciting when you reflect on it longer term and can see all those pieces coming together in the journey as a whole.
What a pleasure hosting both of you. Thanks so much, and wish you more success with this book and the next many books to come. Where can people go and find you and check out this wonderful book?
Well, on Amazon, any bookstore that you usually get your books, really, the Bare Necessities website. So all of the above are great options. But again, thanks so much, Utkarsh, Network Capital, for having us. It was really such a fun time to just chat with you.
Well, we are big fans. Always support mission-driven people. Cheers. See you both. Bye.